better. I did well in my job interview. Good for you. He gives front to a trainee that they couldn't make heads or tails of them. You can't do things at one time. It's out of the question. Do them one by one. Bob, don't disturb her. Mind your own business, he whispered. If he persisted bothering her like that, she'd lose her temper. He was so charged that he couldn't resist temptation. Stop making a fuss. It really gets on my nerves, she shouted. There's no point to talking back to Nick. He's a dictator, so to speak. They are very polite in his presence, but actually, they are always talking about behind his back. You despise Nick, don't you? On the contrary, I look up to him. His constant insults aroused her anger. I'm fed up with just recycling papers pouring coffee. I made up my mind to quit reality. Many people have difficulty making ends meet. How can you get by on my 100,000 a month? Female clerks may well complain about their routines, which are not challenging at all. Thanks to fundamental restructuring, or suffer threefold. Many people today think of loyalty to a company as an absurd notion. I have to commute all the way from distant suburb. I'm sick of it. I want to spend the rest of my life pursuing my deals. After retirement, Teresa devoted herself to caring for orphans. For the sake of children in need, we cooperated to collect donations. The charity named after a man who gave away some 2 billion yen. His autobiography was released today and sold out by noon. Ted, who is often referred to man of integrity, is gonna fall down for mayor. The county was disappointed by the outcome of the election. The municipal council should concentrate on specific issues. This is the case that those who live on pension are forced to lead a hard life. We shouldn't be aware this data. It's far from accurate. We tend to associate politicians with hypocrisy. They are primarily concerned with exploiting us, not with enhancing our living standards. The Mammoth once exerted dominant influence on the Conservative Party, but now his power is diminishing. Spokesperson refused to make any comment, saying it's under investigation. The police said there's someone pulling the strings behind the scenes. The executive entertained bureaucrat at the Ryote or exclusive Japanese restaurant, hoping for something in return. His secretary flatly denied leaking any confidential information. No one dared to contradict his or her employer for fear of being fired. He sacrificed his promising career to retain his dignity. I might as well kill myself, reconcile myself to my fate. He was about to commit suicide by swallowing poison when he thought better of it. The vague rumor proved to be false. Nevertheless, some skepticism lingers on. A senior officer is suspected of accepting bribes from the company, but there isn't sufficient evidence to arrest him. Jason, who was in charge of the project, was dismissed for corruption. To my knowledge, he had not involved in the fraud scheme. They found out the truth while examining a pile of relevant documents. During the trial, it came to light that they had been covering up illegal transactions for decades. The detective took down his testimony on the spot, word for word. For the first time in my life, I felt a pang of conscience, but there was no other way out. I was still haunted by a vivid nightmare I had last night. By and large, reporters don't hesitate to intrude on one's privacy. He also revised his manuscript over and over again. He is second to none when it comes to finding fault with others. On the whole, the elite are not sensitive to criticism. When a tabloid revealed that he was a drug addict, his reputation was all but ruined. Then considered every aspect of the defense program and pointed out the numerous flaws. We will not tolerate anyone who engages in terrorism. The Northwest Rebel was ultimately captured and confined to jail. Troops were swiftly called in to put down the riot. We should appeal to reason instead of resorting to violence. I suggest we adopt flexible tactics for the moment. The armed forces succeeded in occupying the entire territory. And under the circumstances, the enemy had no choice but to surrender. They can't hold out any longer. Sooner or later, the hostages will be set free. Under the reign of tyranny, innocent people were deprived of their citizenship. Some soldiers were reluctant to obey the command. His regime was bound to collapse. The Allies condemned the invasion as a violation of UN resolutions. We cannot rule out the possibility that civil war will break out in that country. The colony declared independence and became a republic. And management was elect of the owner of the noble patriot. He got down on his knees and prayed for the souls of the deceased. The Supreme Court is located near the Imperial Palace. The protest group protested against the ban on abortion. Senator Ford remained neutral in the bitter controversy. Ford has been in a difficult situation all week long. He is no longer capable of coping with it. The sound talks are broadcast simultaneously throughout the world. Diplomatic that helped put the end of the conflict. Johnson was appointed as the group's ambassador to foster mutual understanding between the two nations. The specialist predict international tension will build up. In my opinion, permanent peace is nothing but an illusion. Ethnic minorities struggle against prejudice, poverty, and oppression. We must make every effort to avoid all discrimination. The immigrants have endured physical and mental pain. The amendment was rejected because it didn't take racial diversity into account. Needless to say, the refugees were longing for freedom. According to a survey, 3 in 5 people today are indifferent foreign affairs. What will become of Japan-US relations if the security treaty expires? Unless Japan eliminates its unfair tariffs, the US will impose sanctions. Trade frictions might arise between the two nations at any moment. Our top priority is to settle this dispute once and for all, so we are ready to meet them halfway. The federal budget was narrowly approved by Congress. He argues the administration must look for alternative sources of revenue. Opposes that overwhelming majority is in favor of in legislation. The cops are searching for clues to the brutal murder. The man must be insane. He can't distinguish vice from virtue. The fingerprint left on the weapon correspond with the suspect. It took us all by surprise when the noted psychologist was accused of kidnapping. The jury's guilty verdict gave rise to a widespread debate. The man pleaded for mercy, but he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for his crime. The officer on duty perceived an elderly man coming up behind him. He caught sight of the thief attempting to break into the house. That day before yesterday, he witnessed a weird incident in the wilderness. I became aware someone staring at me across the aisle, so I turned around, but there was no one in sight. She screamed of horror. Someone took hold of her arm. Informed of her safety, he breathed a sigh of relief. The bullet penetrated his chest, leaving him in critical conditions. At present, it's uncertain whether deliberately or by accident. A dairy caught fire and burned down, leaving a heap of ashes. All of a sudden, the fireworks warehouse exploded, and it took 2 days to put out the blaze. A bomb went off in the 33 building, and more than 50 people were seriously wounded. A cargo vessel bound for the ocean sank in the Mediterranean without a trace. The reckless man brought to death during the expedition to the Antarctic. The tragedy must be remembered so as not to be repeated. The exhibition offered profound insight into ancient civilization. Giotto is credited for sowing the seeds of Italian Renaissance. Bob mounted a portrait in the fancy frame, but it was upside down. This magnificent cathedral dates back to the Middle Ages. Age and religion inspired him to create splendid sculptures. They explored the desert in search of the buried treasure. The Millennium insisted on acquiring the masterpiece no matter how much it cost. Myths and legends should be handed down from generation to generation. The linguist is fluent in several Chinese dialects. The tribe worships its ancestors and speaks its own languages, which is not familiar to us. King Hansapuri says old customs still prevail in the province. The wicked witch cast an evil spell on the man and turned him into a bug. They proceeded along a steep path, which was the sole access to the border. When a big ape emerged from the cave, they got frightened and ran away. Believe it or not, I saw an alien and they vanished. Give me a break.